The shadow of the tower, the night was cold, the fog thick, and the Thames whispered secrets as it curled around the ancient stones of the Tower of London. Few dared to tread these grounds after sunset, for tales of whispered screams and shadowed figures clung to every corner. And tonight, the tower was alive with an ominous presence, one that had haunted kings and queens alike. But little did the city know, a story was unfolding that would chill even the bravest souls. Inside the tower, lanterns flickered in the narrow corridors, throwing distorted shadows against the walls, and the echo of footsteps was swallowed by the cold stone. A prisoner shifted in his cell, chains rattling faintly, but he was far from alone. Somewhere beyond the walls, eyes watched, listening for every whisper, and what was about to happen would leave the echoes of fear lingering for centuries. In the outer yard, guards moved with mechanical precision, unaware that tonight's prisoner was unlike any who had come before. He carried secrets that could topple dynasties, betray monarchs, and ignite wars. And while the tower had seen treason before, it had never faced a mind so dangerous, so cunning, so utterly unafraid. The iron gates closed with a resonant clang, locking the city out and trapping history itself within the stone walls. The prisoner had arrived, yet his identity remained cloaked in shadow, known only to the highest echelons of the crown. The city slept unaware, while inside the tower, a game of life and death was about to begin. Footsteps echoed from the upper floors. A torturer, with tools gleaming under candlelight, descended silently, as if summoned by the walls themselves. Each step carried the weight of centuries of cruelty, each creak of the floorboard a reminder of the horrors hidden behind the tower's imposing facade. The prisoner waited, silent, as if sensing the invisible threads of fate drawing tighter. Outside, the wind carried whispers from the city beyond, rumors of executions, of disappearances, of voices that refused to die. The tower had been a royal fortress, a prison, a place where kings and queens left their enemies to rot. But tonight, it was more than stone and shadow. It was a crucible where history would be tested in the flames of fear. Inside the cell, the prisoner's hands were bound, but his mind roamed freely. He thought of the letters hidden in his coat, the alliances betrayed, the faces of those who had condemned him. Each memory was a spark, and each spark threatened to ignite a fire that could burn through the monarchy itself. Yet no sound escaped his lips. Silence, after all, was the most dangerous weapon of all. The guards outside whispered to each other, unaware that the prisoner had already calculated every patrol, every shift, every routine that kept him caged. To them, he was powerless. To history, he was a storm waiting to break, a shadow poised to rewrite the tale of the tower forever. A distant bell tolled, signaling midnight, the hour of judgment, the moment when the tower's ghost stirred most fiercely. Some say that the dead themselves walked the corridors at this hour, watching, waiting, reminding the living of what had come before. And tonight, their silent gaze would focus on the newest captive, the man who dared to defy the crown itself. In the royal chambers above, nobles whispered in fear. They spoke of traitors, of plots uncovered, of a mind that threatened the throne. None suspected that the real danger was not outside the tower, but within, hidden in a cell where chains could not bind cunning. And as the city slept, fate had already chosen its players, its victims, and its witnesses. The prisoner's eyes traced the cracks in the stone, seeing not decay, but opportunity. He imagined the tunnels, the secret passages, the hidden doors forgotten by time. Every corner of the tower had a story, and he intended to use each one to write his own. But even as he plotted, The shadow of the executioner loomed, silent, relentless, ready to strike when the moment came. A sudden gust of wind slammed against the outer wall, rattling the lanterns and sending shadows dancing. The prisoner stiffened, sensing more than just the weather. Something had shifted. A presence, a whisper, a warning, and in that instant, he realized the tower itself was alive, a silent witness to betrayal, torture, and ambition stretching back centuries. Memories of past prisoners flickered through his mind. Anne Boleyn, with her defiance and dignity. Thomas More, steadfast even in death. Guy Fawkes, plotting revolution from within the stone walls. Their stories were warnings, yet also inspirations, and like them, he knew he could become a legend or a ghost whispered about for generations. Footsteps approached the cell again, this time slower, more deliberate. The air thickened with anticipation, and the prisoner's pulse quickened, not with fear, but with a calculated excitement. Every second counted, every sound mattered. History had a rhythm, and tonight, he was determined to compose it himself. The torturer appeared, face shadowed by a hood. In his hands, tools of pain glimmered under the flickering light. Yet the prisoner met him not with terror, but with a calm that unnerved even the most seasoned executioners. Fear, after all, was a currency, and he had no intention of spending it. Outside, the city's bells rang in ominous unison. Somewhere beyond the walls, a plot brewed that would shake the kingdom. Messages passed in the dark, alliances formed in secret, and all of it converged on the tower, where stone and shadow had long kept secrets too dangerous to tell. The prisoner's thoughts drifted to the endgame. Escape was unlikely, but survival was not impossible. With every detail memorized, every guard noted, every shadow understood, he plotted. And even if the tower claimed his body, his mind would remain free, a specter haunting the corridors long after the last candle burned out. A sudden knock at the door made the prisoner tense. The torturer paused, looking uneasy for the first time. Outside, unseen eyes held their breath, waiting for the first spark of chaos. And in that moment, the tower seemed to hold its own breath, waiting for history itself to be written in blood and shadow. The prisoner smiled faintly. Tonight was not just about survival. It was about sending a message. The tower could hold bodies, but it could not hold secrets. And some secrets, once unleashed, had the power to shake kingdoms, topple kings, and haunt the corridors of power for centuries to come. As the candle flickered and shadows stretched along the stone walls, a chilling realization settled. By dawn, nothing would be the same. The tower had a new story to tell, a story of ambition, fear, and the prisoner who dared to defy history itself. And as the city slept, the first moves in a deadly game had already begun. Secrets behind the stone. The morning sun had barely touched the tower when whispers of unrest began to stir. Outside, the city moved as if nothing unusual had occurred. But within the walls, a storm brewed. Prisoners, guards, and nobles alike would soon realize that the tower's history of fear was about to take a darker turn. Hidden from view, a web of secrets stretched through corridors, cellars, and towers, waiting for someone bold enough to unravel it. In the deepest cell, the prisoner listened to the distant clatter of boots echoing along stone halls. Each step seemed deliberate, almost as if the tower itself was guiding them toward a revelation long forgotten. And though chained, he moved his mind freely through the shadows, plotting, calculating, seeing patterns that no ordinary man could detect. Above, the royal apartments buzzed with anxiety. Advisors whispered in hushed tones, worried about rumors of traitors within the tower. Some feared rebellion. Others feared exposure of secrets that could shake the monarchy to its core. Yet none knew the prisoner was already several steps ahead, anticipating every move. The corridors smelled of damp stone and history. Centuries of fear, betrayal, and death clung to the walls like an invisible mist. It was a scent that made even the bravest hesitate, a silent warning that the tower was not just a prison, but a living witness to ambition, greed, and blood. Hidden doors and forgotten tunnels became the prisoner's playground. He mapped them mentally, noting loose stones, weak hinges, and places where guards rarely glanced. Each hidden path offered possibilities: escape, observation, or an untraceable strike. In the tower, knowledge was as lethal as any blade. The torturer appeared again, this time with a new, sharper set of tools. He moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to controlling fear. Yet he did not notice the prisoner's calm, unshaken stare, the flicker of cunning that told a story no chains could suppress. A dangerous game of wills had begun. Outside the tower, pigeons scattered across the misty yard. The city beyond remained oblivious to the intricate dance of life and death unfolding within the fortress walls. And yet, every movement mattered. Every glance could reveal a plot, and every whisper could ignite chaos that history would remember. In a forgotten chamber above the prison cells, a journal lay hidden under dust and cobwebs. Its pages, yellowed and fragile, contained the secrets of previous prisoners, plans, betrayals, warnings, and somehow, the prisoner knew he had to find it. For some secrets, once discovered, could change the fate of kings and entire nations. A sudden scream echoed through the tower. Guards rushed toward it. But it was a decoy, a distraction carefully orchestrated. The prisoner's mind raced, not in panic, but in opportunity. Every chaos within these walls offered a chance, and he intended to exploit every one. Shadows lengthened as the sun climbed higher. The prisoner's mind wandered to those who had walked these halls before him: Anne Boleyn, Lady Jane Grey, Guy Fawkes. Their stories were carved into the tower's stones, warnings and inspirations alike, and he realized that history, for all its weight, was malleable in the hands of the clever and the fearless. Footsteps approached his cell once more, but this time they were slower, almost hesitant. The torturer paused outside, as if sensing something unseen. The prisoner's heart did not race. He had trained his mind for this moment. He watched, calculated, and waited for the perfect opportunity to act. Beneath the tower, the dungeons held forgotten prisoners. Chains clanged, water dripped, and shadows moved as if alive. Each echo was a warning, each shadow a story. The prisoner listened, absorbing the rhythm of despair, using it to predict the guards' routines. The flow of the tower's dark heartbeat. News of political intrigue reached the tower's gates. Letters intercepted, secrets uncovered, alliances threatened. And through it all, the prisoner remained a silent observer, a storm in waiting, knowing that patience and timing could turn even the deadliest prison into a tool for liberation or vengeance. A hidden passage revealed itself in the flickering candlelight. Loose stones, almost invisible to the careless eye, offered a path to freedom, or at least a vantage point. The prisoner's pulse quickened, not with fear, but with anticipation. Opportunity was a rare companion in the tower, and he intended to claim it. Outside, guards argued over trivial matters, oblivious to the danger growing among them. The prisoner smiled faintly. For centuries, the tower had relied on fear to maintain order. But fear alone could not contain someone who understood its every heartbeat. Tonight, He would show them that intelligence was sharper than any sword. Somewhere above, nobles continued to plot, unaware that the prisoner had already mapped every secret staircase, every weak point, every unguarded angle. History had given him a gift: the knowledge that power could be manipulated from the shadows. Even while imprisoned, the torturer entered again, tools in hand, but hesitation lingered in his step. Something was different, an intangible presence, a confidence he could not touch. The prisoner met his gaze, unflinching, and for a moment, the torturer's authority wavered. Even fear could not stand against this silent defiance. The tower seemed to pulse with anticipation. Stone walls, iron gates, and ancient dungeons all whispered promises of chaos yet to come. And as the prisoner plotted his next move, he realized that survival was no longer enough. Tonight, he would become part of the tower's legend, or its darkest ghost. Outside, the city's hum continued, blissfully unaware of the peril contained within the fortress walls. And inside, time seemed to stretch, each second pregnant with potential. The prisoner's mind raced, connecting threads of history, human weakness, and opportunity in ways that would soon leave an indelible mark. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the tower, a chilling realization settled in. The prisoner's story had only just begun. Secrets would be revealed, alliances tested, and lives altered forever. And somewhere in the twisting corridors of stone and shadow, the first move in a deadly, centuries-old game had been made. The web of shadows night fell over the tower like a velvet shroud, concealing secrets in its folds. Lanterns flickered along the stone walls, casting jagged shadows that danced with menace. Every corridor, every stairway, seemed alive with whispers from centuries past. And within this labyrinth, the prisoner plodded, knowing that the faintest misstep could cost him everything or set him free. In the dungeons below, water dripped steadily from cracks in the stone ceiling. The sound was rhythmic, hypnotic, like the heartbeat of the tower itself. Chains clanged in distant cells, echoes of despair and forgotten pain. The prisoner listened, memorizing the cadence, the patterns, the weaknesses hidden in the tower's pulse. His eyes scanned the walls of his cell, noting the cracks, the loose stones, the faint outlines of hidden passages. To an ordinary prisoner, these were just imperfections. To him, they were opportunities, paths to freedom, vantage points for observation, and instruments of psychological warfare against those who thought him helpless. The torturer's footsteps echoed once more. This time, there was hesitation, a crack in the armor of confidence. The prisoner noted it with a silent smile. Fear, after all, was a tool, and tonight he would wield it with precision. Every step the torturer took brought him closer to a revelation he could not yet see, but could almost sense. Far above, nobles whispered behind locked doors, unaware that their plots were being observed by the very man they sought to control. Each letter, each message, each hidden alliance played into the prisoner's hands. Knowledge, he understood, was far deadlier than chains or swords. The prisoner shifted his gaze to the barred window. Through it, the moonlight touched the tower's yard, illuminating the silhouettes of guards. Timing, position, and human error were all mapped in his mind. Every shadow, every silent movement of the night became part of the strategy that would decide not just his fate, but the tower's next chapter. Somewhere deep within the tower, old machinery groaned. Iron doors slid on rusted hinges, echoes carrying secrets of the past. The prisoner's mind raced, connecting memories of former inmates to the present, realizing that the tower itself was a tool, a silent accomplice for those clever enough to see its potential. The torturer returned, tools in hand, his confidence a mask for unease. The prisoner remained calm, his gaze steady, unyielding. The air in the cell thickened, heavy with anticipation. A confrontation was coming, not one of brute force, but of wits, strategy, and survival. A loose stone caught the prisoner's attention. Beneath it, he glimpsed a narrow passage, dark and unexplored. The risk was enormous. The guards could catch him. The path could collapse, or worse. Yet the lure of freedom, of leverage over those who thought him powerless, was irresistible. Outside, the city slept, unaware of the storm brewing inside the tower. Messages were being exchanged, plans drawn in secrecy, alliances forged in shadow. The prisoner's role in this game was silent, invisible, yet increasingly central. Every step he took, every observation, was another thread woven into a web of shadows that would trap the unsuspecting. The guards argued in the yard, oblivious to the prisoner's scrutiny. Each voice, each misstep, each shift in posture was catalogued. Timing and human error were weapons as potent as any blade. And the prisoner knew that the tower's history was full of men and women who underestimated the power of patience and observation. Candlelight flickered against the stone walls, revealing the faint outline of a hidden alcove. The prisoner moved toward it mentally, memorizing its location, imagining how it could be used to observe the torturer, eavesdrop on conversations, or provide a path for escape. Every inch of the tower was now a piece of his strategy. A faint whisper echoed from the shadows. The prisoner froze, senses sharpened. Was it a ghost, a guard, or a fellow prisoner signaling from the darkness? In the tower, uncertainty was as dangerous as any weapon. And yet, he welcomed the unknown. It provided both information and opportunity. Memories of past prisoners filled his mind. Anne Boleyn's defiance, Thomas More's steadfastness, Guy Fawkes' cunning, all were echoes of survival, of ambition, of tragedy. They became guides, cautionary tales, and inspirations for the plan slowly taking shape in his mind. Footsteps approached from above, deliberate and measured. The prisoner's heart did not race. Instead, he noted the pattern, predicting each pause, each glance, each turn. Knowledge of human behavior was more powerful than brute force, and he intended to wield it like a scalpel, precise and unforgiving. The air in the tower grew colder, heavier. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, as if the stone itself sensed the tension. The prisoner moved silently in his mind through hidden corridors, mapping escape routes, observing guard rotations, and calculating probabilities. Every detail mattered, and the tower offered an infinite canvas. Outside, the night deepened. The city beyond the walls was unaware that history itself was being rewritten in secret. Every movement of the prisoner, every calculated pause, every silent breath was part of a strategy that could change the balance of power within the tower forever. A sudden noise startled the guards, a dropped key, perhaps, or a shifted stone. The prisoner's mind raced. Every moment of distraction, every lapse in attention, became a potential advantage. He was learning the tower's rhythm, and with that knowledge came power. The torturer paused near the prisoner's cell, a shadow of doubt in his step. Confidence had once ruled him. Now hesitation lingered. The prisoner knew that fear was contagious, that even the strongest could falter in the presence of unyielding calm. And tonight, he would use that knowledge to tip the scales. As midnight approached, the tower seemed to hold its breath. Shadows stretched, whispers carried through corridors, and the prisoner prepared for a daring move that could either secure his freedom or seal his doom. History had long been written by kings and conquerors, but tonight it would be rewritten from the shadows of the tower, by a mind fearless enough to challenge centuries of power. The first move, the prisoner waited in the shadows, every nerve alert, every sense tuned to the subtle rhythms of the tower. The flickering candlelight cast elongated shadows on the damp stone walls, creating illusions of movement where there was none. Yet even in darkness, he could see the tower's labyrinthine corridors were now a map in his mind, and every stone whispered its secrets. Above, the torturer paused at the top of the stairs, tools in hand, unaware that tonight the prisoner would test him in ways the tower had never witnessed. Fear had always been the torturer's weapon, but the prisoner had mastered patience, turning the anticipated terror into an instrument of psychological leverage. A loose brick caught his eye, a subtle flaw in the wall long overlooked. Behind it, a narrow passage twisted out of sight, promising secrecy and vantage points. Every risk was calculated, every potential discovery weighed. The prisoner knew that the tower's history was written in blood, but he intended to leave his mark through intelligence and audacity. He shifted slightly, careful not to disturb the chains that bound him. The torturer's footsteps approached again, slow and deliberate. Each step was music to the prisoner's ears, providing the rhythm for a plan long imagined but never attempted. Patience, he knew, could be deadlier than a sword. Outside, the tower yard lay silent under the cold gaze of the moon. Guards moved in predictable patterns, their routines catalogued in the prisoner's mind. Every misstep, every moment of complacency could be exploited, and tonight they would learn that knowledge could be far more terrifying than brute force. The prisoner's gaze traced the outline of the passageway behind the loose brick. It was narrow, claustrophobic, and dangerous, yet it offered a path to opportunity, whether escape, observation, or manipulation of those who believed they controlled him. The tower had underestimated one thing: his intellect. A faint creak in the corridor signaled a guard's approach. The prisoner froze, blending into the shadows, heart steady despite the adrenaline. In the tower, every movement mattered, every breath counted. A single mistake could mean death, yet caution alone would not suffice. He needed action, timing, and audacity. Slowly, deliberately, he shifted his weight, testing the chains. One link was slightly worn, a weakness unnoticed by centuries of guards. The prisoner memorized it, calculating how much leverage it offered. Even the tiniest detail could become a weapon when wielded with patience and cunning. The torturer's shadow fell across the floor, elongated by the flickering lantern. His eyes searched for signs of weakness, of fear, of submission. Yet the prisoner offered none. Calm, composed, his gaze met the torturer's briefly, and for a heartbeat, authority faltered. The tower's rules, built on intimidation, trembled against silent defiance. Somewhere above, the city slept, oblivious to the game unfolding within the tower walls. Messages were passed, alliances forged, and secrets traded, all unnoticed. But within the fortress, a single prisoner held the threads, ready to pull them in directions no one anticipated. The loose brick beckoned, a hidden tunnel stretched beyond sight, dust motes dancing in its faint shadows. The prisoner imagined every step along its length, the sounds, the smells, the faint vibration of footsteps elsewhere. In the tower, imagination could be as sharp as any blade, and he intended to wield it fully. A distant scream echoed from a lower dungeon. Guards rushed toward it, leaving gaps in their patrols. Opportunity presented itself, fragile and fleeting. The prisoner's pulse quickened, not with fear, but with anticipation. The first move was imminent. and timing would decide its success. Carefully, he shifted, inch by inch, toward the hidden passage. The chains clinked softly, but the sound was lost in the tower's natural echoes. Each movement was deliberate, calculated, part of a plan that required patience, courage, and perfect timing. The torturer's approach slowed, his unease growing. The prisoner sensed it, knew it. Fear had its own rhythm, and the torturer's heartbeat faltered in a pattern the prisoner had predicted. Silence became a weapon, more powerful than the instruments in the torturer's hands. Reaching the brick, the prisoner pressed it subtly. It moved slightly, revealing the narrow gap behind it. Darkness beckoned, a path unknown, dangerous, and filled with possibilities. The first move was now within his grasp, a step that could change everything. Outside, the guards continued their rounds, unaware of the silent predator moving through their domain. Every shadow, every corner, every unguarded angle was now under observation. The tower, long a prison for others, had become a stage for his strategy. The prisoner slipped into the narrow passage, muscles taut, senses alert. The air was damp, thick with the scent of stone and history. Every step was measured, deliberate, echoing faintly, yet blending perfectly with the tower's natural rhythm. The torturer lingered outside, uneasy. Something was amiss, though he could not pinpoint it. Confidence, once absolute, faltered slightly, the first crack in the tower's centuries-old armor. And within that uncertainty lay the prisoner's greatest advantage. The passage twisted and turned, a maze hidden beneath the tower's surface. Each corner offered new possibilities, observation points, and opportunities to manipulate events above. He moved silently, thinking several steps ahead, aware that the tower itself seemed to conspire with him, offering secret paths to those clever enough to see them. As the first light of dawn threatened to touch the tower's outer walls, the prisoner paused in the darkness, listening. The game had begun, and every piece on the board was about to move in ways no one could predict. The tower, ancient and imposing, had met its match, and in the shadows, the prisoner smiled. His first move was complete, but the real challenge was just beginning. The hidden alliances the passageway led the prisoner to a small, forgotten chamber, the air damp and heavy with the scent of centuries. The faint light from cracks above barely illuminated the walls, but it was enough to reveal what he had been seeking. Remnants of old prisoners' marks, scratches on stone, subtle signs of those who had survived the tower's shadows before him. He knelt, tracing the faint etchings with his fingers. Each mark was a message, a code, a warning from souls long forgotten. The prisoner realized he was not the first to attempt to manipulate this place from within, but he intended to succeed where others had failed, and that knowledge gave him a thrill no chains could suppress. Footsteps echoed faintly in the distance. Other prisoners, too, moved silently through the dark passages, aware of the tower's hidden rhythms. The prisoner knew that alliances were fragile in such a place. Trust could be fatal, betrayal common, but connections could also provide access, information, and leverage that no solitary effort could achieve. A faint whisper reached him from a shadowed corner. He paused, listening. The voice was cautious but clear, carrying intelligence, fear, and a hidden plea for cooperation. The prisoner weighed his options: ally and risk betrayal, or ignore and remain isolated. History favored the bold, and he was nothing if not bold. Slowly, he approached the voice, revealing himself in the dim light. Another prisoner, gaunt and wary, studied him with suspicion. "Who are you?" the man whispered. The prisoner's response was calm, deliberate. "Someone who knows the tower better than it knows itself." and someone who wants more than survival. The man studied him, hesitation flickering in his eyes. Survival in the tower had always required careful choices, but something about the prisoner, his confidence, his knowledge, his calm presence, suggested he was not like the others. Perhaps, he thought, this stranger could change everything. They spoke in hushed tones, exchanging information gleaned from months of observation. Guards' routines, hidden passages, the tower's structural weaknesses, all became pieces of a puzzle that, if correctly assembled, could tip the balance of power within the fortress. And the prisoner realized that knowledge, when combined with courage, could be weaponized. Outside, the city remained unaware of the clandestine activity unfolding within the tower's walls. Letters, alliances, and rumors circulated among the nobility, but the real power struggle was hidden below, in stone chambers and narrow tunnels where life and death balanced on razor-thin threads of cunning. The prisoner shared his plan carefully, emphasizing secrecy and timing. One mistake could alert guards, unravel alliances, or seal their fates. Yet the other prisoner listened intently, understanding that the tower had long been a place where the clever survived while the naive perished. Together, they mapped routes through the tower, noting weak doors, unguarded windows, and faint traces of ancient escape routes. Every detail mattered. Every observation could become a step toward freedom or a trap leading to death. The tower, ancient and imposing, seemed to watch, waiting to judge their choices. A sudden noise in a distant corridor made them freeze. Footsteps, heavier this time, approaching rapidly. They retreated into the shadows, silent and still, hearts pounding. The guards passed, oblivious to the silent strategists moving through hidden corridors, their survival hinging on patience, observation, and flawless timing. Once the danger passed, the prisoner continued. He spoke of possibilities: misdirection, using fear against the torturer, exploiting the guards' routines, even manipulating the tower's own history to unsettle those in power. Each suggestion heightened the other prisoners' awe and unease. The hidden chamber offered more than shelter. It provided perspective. From here, the prisoner could visualize the tower as a chessboard, with guards, torturers, and prisoners as pieces to be moved. Strategy, he knew, could accomplish what brute force never could. Whispers of betrayal floated through the corridors, remnants of prior prisoners' paranoia. But the prisoner remained focused. Fear could cloud judgment, yet calm analysis turned danger into opportunity. Every shadow, every echo, every unnoticed detail became part of a map only he could read. They moved carefully through a narrow corridor, observing patrols above. The prisoner noted their timing with precision. Guards paused to rest, shifted in predictable ways, and left gaps that could be exploited. It was a rhythm, a code, and he intended to master it fully before making any bold moves. A hidden hatch offered access to a forgotten part of the tower, a place where prisoners long forgotten had left clues, tools, and records. The prisoner's eyes gleamed. History had left breadcrumbs for those clever enough to follow them, and he was more than capable. Slowly, the two prisoners began experimenting with minor misdirections, small distractions, testing guard reactions. Every subtle action provided insight, every misstep a warning. The tower had long been a place of terror, but they were learning to manipulate fear instead of succumbing to it. The prisoner realized that alliances, fragile as they were, could extend beyond these tunnels. Other captives, spies, or even sympathetic guards could become instruments in his plan. But trust would be earned carefully, tested in small, precise increments. A single misjudgment could end everything. Night deepened, and the tower seemed to pulse with anticipation. Every shadow became a potential ally or enemy, every whisper a clue, and as the prisoner prepared to return to his own cell, he understood the truth. Survival in the tower required more than cunning. It demanded control over perception, patience, and the ability to act with cold precision. As dawn approached, the first moves of their hidden game had been made. Subtle manipulations, secret alliances, and careful observations had shifted the balance. The tower, ancient and imposing, had met its match, and in the shadows, the prisoner smiled. His web of influence was growing, and those who believed they controlled him would soon realize that the real power had always been in the shadows. The clockwork of fear night descended like ink over the tower, swallowing corridors in darkness. The prisoner moved through the passages with the precision of a predator, each step deliberate, each breath measured. The flickering lanterns outside cast fleeting shadows that made the walls seem alive, and he used every illusion to his advantage, turning the tower's ancient stones into a silent accomplice. A guard's distant footsteps echoed sharply, startling a flock of pigeons in the yard. The prisoner froze, pressed against the damp wall. His mind calculated the distance, the speed, the pattern of the patrol, and he moved again, melting into shadows before detection. Every near miss sharpened his instincts, each encounter reinforcing the delicate balance between fear and control. In a narrow stairwell, he paused, noticing subtle changes. A loose stone that had shifted since his last visit, a faint scratch on the wall where a previous prisoner had marked a warning. The tower had been a prison for centuries, but its secrets were like threads waiting to be woven into a larger design. His design, somewhere above, the torturer lingered, tools in hand, sensing unease he could not explain. Confidence had always been his ally, but tonight uncertainty crept in. The prisoner's calm defiance radiated even through stone and shadows, unsettling the man whose authority had never been questioned before. The prisoner entered a hidden alcove, the air thick with the smell of damp stone and mold. He traced fingers along the walls, feeling for hidden switches and secret levers. Every inch of the tower was a puzzle, and he was determined to solve it before anyone suspected his intentions. Outside, the guards continued their patrols, unaware that every subtle misstep, every open door, every faintly shifted shadow was being cataloged. The prisoner noted patterns, routines, and vulnerabilities. Knowledge, he knew, was a weapon sharper than any blade or chain. A distant shout rang through the tower. Two guards had discovered a minor disturbance, perhaps a fallen piece of equipment or a loose stone. The prisoner's mind raced. Chaos, even small, could be leveraged, exploited, and used to manipulate perception. Every distraction was a step closer to opportunity. He pressed against the wall of a narrow corridor, watching a guard pass. Timing was everything. Too early, and the ruse would fail. Too late, and the risk of discovery grew. The prisoner's heartbeat remained steady, though his mind calculated in fractions of seconds the difference between life and death in the tower. The torturer's footsteps moved in the opposite direction, cautious, measured. Something had changed in the air, a subtle tension that could not be ignored. The prisoner remained calm, his presence invisible, yet the unseen battle had begun. The tower, with all its stone and shadow, seemed to lean in, watching. In a hidden passage, he discovered remnants of old prisoners' tools, rusted keys, scraps of metal, fragments of rope. Each item, discarded yet potent, became part of a larger plan. The tower, a centuries-old prison, had left him clues, unintentionally aiding his strategy. He moved toward a grated window, high above the yard. Through it, he could observe the guards, their routines, and the subtle signs of fatigue and complacency. Each observation fed into a growing mental map of control. In the tower, power was never about brute force. It was about perception, timing, and manipulation. A faint whisper drifted from a shadowed corner, a fellow prisoner, signaling an opportunity. The prisoner's eyes flicked toward the sound, calculating trust, evaluating risk. Alliances in the tower were fragile. Yet, used correctly, they could magnify influence and expand control far beyond the walls of any single cell. Slowly, carefully, he manipulated the small tools he had found, testing mechanisms hidden behind walls, in corners, in the very floor beneath him. Each lever, each hinge, each unseen device was a thread in a clockwork of fear he intended to control. The torturer entered the corridor nearby. Tools clinked softly, echoing unnaturally. The prisoner froze, his shadow blending into the recesses. He observed every gesture, every twitch, every hesitation. Even a seasoned executioner could be influenced by unseen forces, and tonight, he would see how far subtle manipulation could reach. Outside, the moonlight caught the faint outline of the tower's gates. The prisoner envisioned escape routes, signals, diversions. Every structural weakness, every forgotten corner became a potential path to freedom or to a trap for those who underestimated him. A sudden crash resounded from the lower dungeons. Guards rushed toward it, leaving corridors temporarily unguarded. The prisoner moved with precision, testing the effect of chaos on the tower's defenders. Each small disruption provided valuable insight, a lesson in psychology and strategy. He pressed himself into a shadowed alcove, listening as the torturer debated with a guard. Hesitation, doubt, uncertainty, these were the weapons he wielded now. The tower, centuries of fear and cruelty, was yielding to his understanding of its rhythms and weaknesses. In the hidden passage, he discovered faint carvings on the wall, coordinates, warnings, even riddles left by prisoners long gone. Each symbol became part of a growing mental map of the tower's secrets. Knowledge would be his ally, and manipulation would be his sword. Time moved slowly, deliberately. Every breath, every heartbeat, every subtle movement was measured. The prisoner's first overt actions had begun, testing reactions, gauging fear, exploiting hesitation. The tower's clockwork of terror had its gears shifted, and he was now turning them in his favor. As dawn began to touch the tower's outer walls with pale light, the prisoner paused in the darkness. His first moves had set the stage. Alliances, observations, and manipulations were in motion. The tower's ancient shadows now concealed not just fear, but a growing force of cunning, patience, and calculated audacity. And the prisoner knew, with a thrill that ran through every nerve, the real game had only just begun. The edge of escaped darkness enveloped the tower once again, thick and suffocating, a cloak that hid secrets and opportunity alike. The prisoner pressed himself against the cold stone, heart steady, mind racing. Every step he took now had meaning, not just survival, but the beginning of a plan that could turn the tower itself against those who believed they controlled it. Above, the torturer prowled, senses heightened. Confidence had long been his armor, but the prisoner's calm defiance had begun to unnerve him. Every subtle shift in shadow, every whisper, every creak of stone beneath invisible footsteps unsettled him. The game had changed, and he was not aware of the rules. The prisoner traced the walls of his cell, noting weak hinges and cracked mortar. His hands were bound, but his mind moved freely, envisioning escape routes, hidden tunnels, and observation points. The tower, once a prison, was slowly transforming into a stage for his ingenuity. A distant clatter echoed, a dropped key, perhaps, or a shift in a guard's weapon. The prisoner froze, listening, counting steps, measuring distance, opportunity and risk balanced on a knife's edge. And he knew that one miscalculation could be fatal. Using subtle movements, he tested the chains binding him. One link, worn and weak, gave just enough leverage. A small tool, hidden in his sleeve, could exploit it. Every detail, no matter how minor, became a potential instrument in his daring plan. Shadows flickered along the corridor as the torturer's lantern swung, casting long, unpredictable patterns. The prisoner adjusted, aligning himself with darkness, becoming invisible in plain sight. Even the air seemed to conspire with him, concealing his presence as if the tower itself was aiding his design. He whispered softly to his hidden ally, confirming guard patterns and timing. Trust was a dangerous currency, yet essential. Every word, every gesture had to be precise. They were threads woven into the first tangible moves of their plan. Delicate yet potent, a guard paused outside the cell, lantern in hand, a shadow stretching across the floor. The prisoner froze, muscles tense, breathing controlled. He had learned the patterns, the rhythm of fear, and now the rhythm became his weapon. Slowly, carefully, he shifted toward the loose brick, testing the mechanism. The stone gave slightly, revealing the narrow passage beyond. Darkness beckoned, a path fraught with danger, but alive with promise. Each heartbeat was a drum of anticipation, the tower's ancient stones whispering encouragement. The torturer moved closer, tools clinking, footsteps measured. Confidence faltered slightly as subtle signs of manipulation reached his subconscious. The prisoner sensed it, smiled faintly, and pressed onward, unseen but fully aware. Within the hidden passage, the prisoner traced familiar markings left by those who had survived before him. Each etching provided guidance, each faded scratch a whisper from history, warning of pitfalls, yet offering solutions to those perceptive enough to follow. He moved toward a grated window overlooking the yard, calculating distances, timing, and guard rotations. Escape would not come through brute force, but through precision, patience, and the exploitation of human error. The prisoner understood the tower's weaknesses better than anyone. A sudden noise below, a chain falling, perhaps, or a startled guard, forced him to halt. He pressed against the wall, listening, waiting. Every second was a test. Every movement could ignite catastrophe or opportunity. His ally signaled, faint and cautious, from another shadow corner. Communication was silent, subtle, but crucial. Timing and coordination would make the difference between capture and advantage, and the prisoner had mastered both. Slowly, inch by inch, he advanced through the passage, exploiting every shadow, every unnoticed corner. The tower, centuries old, had never seen such deliberate navigation, silent, calculating, and lethal in its subtlety. A guard appeared in the yard below, pausing mid-step. The prisoner froze, heart steady, mind racing. Observation, he knew, was as deadly as action. One wrong move could unravel everything. Yet patience allowed him to turn fear into strategy. Reaching the end of the passage, he discovered a narrow trapdoor, hidden beneath centuries of dust and neglect. The path beyond was dark, uncertain, and fraught with risk, but it was also the first tangible step toward freedom. The torturer's voice echoed faintly, a command, a warning. Confidence faltered. The prisoner listened, understanding that psychological manipulation was as vital as any physical maneuver. The gears of fear were turning, and he had nudged them carefully. He descended cautiously through the trapdoor, every sound measured, every shadow accounted for. The tower's heart seemed to beat in tandem with his own. Corridors alive with whispers of anticipation, history itself conspiring with subtle, patient genius. As he reached the lower chamber, a flicker of moonlight illuminated an unexpected figure. A guard, momentarily distracted, unaware of the prisoner's presence. The tension snapped like a taut string. The first move of escape had been executed, but the real challenge remained. Every step forward would test skill, patience, and nerve. As the tower's shadows seemed to close in from every direction, the labyrinth unveiled darkness, draped the tower like a suffocating shroud, thick with secrets centuries old. The prisoner advanced through narrow passages, every footfall deliberate, each breath measured. The air smelled of damp stone, history, and decay, an aroma that whispered warnings to all who had come before. But he was undeterred. Shadows shifted across the walls, elongating unnaturally, as if the tower itself was observing him. Each corridor twisted unpredictably, yet he navigated them with uncanny precision, tracing hidden routes few had ever discovered. The labyrinth was alive, but he had learned to read its subtle signals. Somewhere above, the torturer moved like a specter, searching, probing, unaware that the prisoner had already disappeared into the tower's bowels. Each corridor he passed heightened attention, each shadow a potential hiding place, each silent corner a vantage point to observe and manipulate. The prisoner's fingers traced etched symbols left by previous captives, warning signs, coded directions, remnants of ingenuity hidden in stone. Each marking revealed centuries of human ingenuity and desperation, and he used them to guide his path through the dark maze. A faint scuffle echoed through a side passage. He froze, pressing against the wall, ears straining. Another prisoner? A guard? Or perhaps something older, something the tower had kept hidden from all who dared explore its depths. The uncertainty sharpened his senses, heightening his awareness. Slowly, he pressed onward, aware that danger lurked in every shadow. Hidden trapdoors, weakened floors, and unseen staircases became both threats and opportunities. Each step required calculation, each movement a balance between boldness and caution. At a junction, he paused. To the left, the passage sloped downward into darkness. To the right, an air of stale, trapped energy warned of collapsed tunnels. His choice could determine not just immediate survival, but the success of the entire plan. He chose the left, intuition guiding him deeper into the tower's forgotten veins. Somewhere above, distant lanterns flickered. Guards moved in familiar patterns, unknowingly playing into the prisoner's strategy. Each step they took, each pause, each glance, he cataloged it all, weaving a map invisible to everyone but himself. A sudden whisper echoed behind him. He froze, listening intently. Shadows seemed to twist around the sound, bending perception, creating illusions. Every corridor became a stage for fear, and he was learning to command the performance. He entered a larger chamber, the ceiling arched and blackened with age. Broken tools and remnants of centuries past lay scattered across the floor. It was both a trap and a treasure trove, an opportunity to find implements, hidden knowledge, or shortcuts that could bypass heavily guarded areas. From a narrow crack in the wall, he glimpsed movement, a guard, or worse, the torturer himself, perhaps following his scent. The prisoner froze, mind calculating every possibility, every contingency. His pulse remained steady. Anticipation had replaced fear. The labyrinth shifted around him. Hidden doors, passages behind false walls, tunnels beneath the floor. They all converged here. The prisoner's mind raced, piecing together a three-dimensional map of the tower's secret architecture. each corridor a potential advantage, each shadow a tool of deception. A faint scratch of metal on stone alerted him to another presence. He pressed himself into the alcove, blending seamlessly with the darkness. Every sound, every step, every breath of the tower seemed amplified. Survival required patience, cunning, and nerves of steel. He discovered an old hatch in the floor, nearly invisible beneath centuries of dust. The air that escaped smelled stale, but promising. This was a route few had used. It was dangerous, uncertain, yet vital for the next stage of his plan. He considered it carefully, weighing risk against reward. Above, distant voices argued. The guard's frustration echoed faintly, a signal of minor chaos, of order unraveling. The prisoner's heart raced, not from fear, but from opportunity. Every human error was now a tool, every hesitation a key. He descended into the hatch carefully, the darkness swallowing him. The passage narrowed, forcing him to move with extreme caution. Every inch brought new uncertainty, collapsed beams, weak flooring, unseen holes, but also the promise of leverage, observation, and control over those who thought themselves masters. In the narrow tunnel, he found signs of previous escape attempts, scratches, worn stones, faint stains. Each was a warning, yet also a guide. The tower's ghost seemed to whisper advice, urging him onward while cautioning restraint. A sudden thud resonated above, a warning of approaching guards. He froze, pressed against the wall, listening to the rhythm of their footsteps. Timing was everything now. The smallest miscalculation could lead to discovery, capture, or death. He moved silently past the danger, each step a demonstration of control over fear and environment. The labyrinth had tested countless prisoners, breaking them mentally and physically. Yet, he navigated it with precision, understanding that survival alone was no longer the goal. The tower itself would bend to his will. As he emerged into a dimly lit chamber deeper within the tower, he paused. The web of shadows, corridors, and hidden passages had led him here, to a nexus of potential, escape routes, vantage points, and secrets yet untapped. The prisoner understood that the real turning point was approaching, and in the silence, the tower seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see whether the boldest prisoner in its history would triumph or perish. The gauntlet of shadows. The prisoner emerged into a wider chamber, the air thick with centuries of dust and secrecy. Shadows clung to the walls like living entities, stretching, twisting, and hiding dangers he could feel but not yet see. Each step forward was a gamble, every creak of stone a possible signal of discovery. Above, footsteps echoed, louder, heavier than before. Guards were converging, alerted by the faint disturbances the prisoner's exploration had caused. This was no longer merely stealth. This was a gauntlet, a trial designed to test every ounce of cunning, patience, and nerve. He ducked behind a broken pillar, heart steady, eyes scanning. The passageways were treacherous, filled with sudden drops, weak flooring, and hidden recesses. A single misstep could spell disaster, but he was prepared, having memorized every shadow and flaw in the tower's structure. The first guard rounded the corner, lantern swinging. The light flickered over the prisoner's hiding place. He remained perfectly still, blending into the darkness. Even instinct could not betray him. He was a shadow among shadows, invisible in the very space the tower had designed for imprisonment. Another guard appeared, slightly distracted, conversing with his comrade. The prisoner listened to their routine, their patterns, and the subtle hierarchy in their commands. Every word, every pause, every step became intelligence, a weapon in the unseen battle of mind against mind. He pressed forward slowly, using the cover of shadows. A loose brick offered a vantage point over the patrol path. From this hidden perch, he observed, memorized, and calculated. Every guard, every step, every pause became part of the intricate map guiding his escape. A sudden creak above froze him mid-step. The torturer appeared, lantern in hand, surveying the area with instinct honed by years of cruelty. Confidence was supposed to be his shield, but the prisoner sensed doubt, hesitation, the first flicker of fear. He moved silently across the chamber, exploiting every shadow, every broken tile, every unnoticed corner. The labyrinthine passages were no longer merely hiding places. They were instruments of psychological manipulation. Each silent movement sent ripples of uncertainty through his pursuers. The first guard, distracted by a shifted shadow, nearly stumbled into him. The prisoner pressed against the wall, pulse steady, waiting for the perfect moment. One wrong move, and he would be discovered. One right move, and he would gain an advantage that could turn the gauntlet into a trap for them. He found a narrow alcove, nearly invisible in the flickering lantern light. It offered concealment and a vantage point. From here, he could watch, wait, and manipulate, understanding the tower's rhythm better than anyone alive. Fear was no longer merely his enemy. It was a tool he could wield. The torturer paused, listening intently, trying to discern the source of subtle disturbances. Each sound, each shadow, each hint of movement heightened tension. The prisoner watched, a silent conductor orchestrating a symphony of misdirection. Another guard passed, slightly out of formation. The prisoner's mind raced, calculating timings, angles, and opportunities. Each misstep by the enemy strengthened his position, offering leverage he could exploit with precision. He dropped silently into a hidden passage, the stone cold against his palms, the smell of history heavy in the air. The gauntlet had begun in earnest, and he moved with the expertise of someone who had studied every twist and turn, every shadow, and every sound. Ahead, a faint glimmer hinted at another chamber, possibly a junction for multiple paths. He approached cautiously, ears straining. Each corner was a decision point. One wrong turn could trap him. One right turn could open a path to the tower's outer reaches. A sudden shout echoed behind him. The guards had discovered a minor clue, a dropped tool, a displaced stone. They were closing in, unaware that their own panic would make them predictable. He smiled faintly. Chaos, when understood, could be manipulated. He slipped through a narrow doorway, finding himself in a high-ceilinged chamber, remnants of ancient prisoners' markings etched into the walls. Every scratch, every symbol became a guide. The labyrinth had secrets, and he intended to use them all. Above, lanterns swung violently as guards searched blindly. The prisoner remained unseen, yet their panic became a weapon. Every misdirected step, every false lead, every hesitation amplified his advantage in this deadly chess game. He moved carefully toward a grated window overlooking a small courtyard. The yard was empty, but every guard above it was vulnerable to misdirection. With subtle shifts and precise timing, he could manipulate perception, turning fear into control without being seen. The torture appeared again. Frustration etched into his features. Confidence faltered as subtle inconsistencies suggested the prisoner was always one step ahead. The gauntlet had become a stage, and the prisoner the invisible puppeteer. As the first rays of dawn threatened to breach the tower's shadows, the prisoner paused, heart steady, mind sharp. He had survived the gauntlet of shadows, manipulated fear, and learned the limits of his adversaries. But the ultimate challenge, the final turning point in his plan, was still ahead. The tower had yet to reveal all of its secrets, And the prisoner's true test was just beginning. The shadow triumphs. The first light of dawn seeped through narrow windows, casting pale beams across the tower's stone corridors. Shadows stretched and twisted, offering both concealment and menace. The prisoner moved silently, every step a calculated measure toward freedom. Today, centuries of fear would meet cunning. The torturer had grown uneasy, pacing corridors, tools in hand, his confidence fractured. Something unseen was at work. The prisoner's manipulation of shadows, sounds, and human error had begun to take its toll. Authority was faltering in the very fortress designed to enforce it. He navigated toward a junction where several hidden passages converged. Each path had been mapped, memorized, and mentally rehearsed. One wrong turn could end everything, yet he moved with complete confidence. The labyrinth had become his instrument, and he was the master of its chords. A guard appeared at the end of a corridor, lantern raised. The prisoner melted into darkness, exploiting a recess perfectly aligned with the shadow of the stone arch. To the observer, he was invisible, a phantom moving through solid walls. Another guard followed, distracted by the first. The prisoner's plan depended on timing. Every misstep, every hesitation, became a tool to manipulate perception. The tower's ancient architecture amplified each sound, each shadow, each subtle movement. He reached the hatch he had previously discovered, leading to a narrow tunnel beneath the tower. The air smelled of stale dampness, history, and opportunity. It was the final artery that could lead him to freedom or closer to peril. Carefully, he descended, avoiding loose stones and weak flooring. The labyrinth seemed to respond, guiding him towards safety while concealing him from view. Every corridor he had memorized, every shadow he had studied, was now a weapon. Above, the torturer's frustration boiled. Commands were shouted, guards were redirected, yet the prisoner remained elusive. Panic, subtle but undeniable, crept into their movements. The fortress designed to instill fear was now feeding it. The prisoner paused at a narrow alcove, peering through a grate into the courtyard. Below, the guards were clustered, distracted by the misdirection he had orchestrated. One false alarm, one seemingly minor anomaly, had drawn them together. Perfect. He emerged from the hatch, blending seamlessly with the shadows along the wall. Every footstep was deliberate, calculated. The faint sound of his breathing was absorbed by the tower's echoes. Time, attention, and precision were his allies in this final act. A lantern swayed dangerously close, illuminating part of the corridor. The prisoner froze, heart steady, mind alert. One misjudged move would expose him. Yet his confidence did not waver. He had rehearsed every detail, every contingency, every possible reaction. From a hidden vantage, he signaled to his ally, coordinating the final phase. Small diversions, faint sounds, and subtle manipulations created chaos among the guards. Perception was the battlefield now, and he controlled it fully. The torturer appeared, voice sharp, demanding obedience, his eyes scanning for signs of the intruder. The prisoner's movements were invisible, yet his influence was unmistakable. Fear had turned inward on those who wielded it. With deliberate precision, the prisoner activated a subtle mechanism he had discovered, a hidden latch causing a section of stone floor to shift slightly. A loud clatter echoed, drawing guards away from their posts. Exactly as he had predicted, he advanced silently across the newly opened path, feeling the thrill of control, the power of knowledge, and the audacity of execution. Every shadow, every corner, every element of the tower was under his command. The guards scrambled, misdirected by his careful orchestration. The torturer's frustration grew, his authority slipping further with each misaligned step. Chaos, expertly manipulated, became the prisoner's greatest weapon. He approached the final exit, a narrow doorway leading to an external courtyard. Beyond it lay freedom, sunlight, and a world he had been denied for far too long. Yet caution remained paramount. The last step was always the most dangerous. A guard appeared directly in his path, lantern raised. The prisoner froze momentarily, then used a subtle shadow, a brief movement, and a misdirection learned over countless hours to slip past unseen. Every second stretched, every heartbeat amplified. He stepped into the courtyard, the first true sunlight touching his face in months. Behind him, the tower remained alive with confusion and fear. Its defenders manipulated, outwitted, and outmaneuvered. The prisoner had turned the ancient fortress against those who thought themselves masters. Standing in the open air, he paused, breathing deeply. The tower's shadows still lingered, its secrets still concealed. Yet he had triumphed. Knowledge, patience, cunning, and audacity had outweighed brute force. The prisoner, once a victim of history, had become the master of the tower's ancient game. And as he disappeared into the waking city, one truth remained. Fear can imprison the body, but only cleverness can master the soul.